This is a Bloody Vegans production.
Veganism started from, vegetarianism is always the one where it starts, isn't it, for most people? So that started when I was 8 years old. I was at some shop, I hate shopping, but my parents used to drag me shopping on a weekend. And I saw International Fund for Animal Welfare. Do you remember when they used to be out on the streets and there would be somebody dressed as a bunny with horrific bleeding eyes? I don't know that they would get away with that now. I don't know. But I remember seeing that, and I must have been about 7 and being absolutely traumatised by it and thinking, oh my days, going, because there was no internet then, because we're old, and taking a pamphlet and reading it in the back of the car all the way home and thinking, this is horrendous. This is absolutely horrendous. And making the decision that day that was it. That was what I was going to do. That was going to be my life, was to stop this. And you say those things when you're 7, don't they? And what actually happened was I went into veterinary practice, which is about as far away as you can get from that in some respects. But I remember saying to Mum, right, I need to be vegetarian. We need to buy everything that's cruelty free, and I need to be vegetarian. And to be fair, Mum was really good about it. Dad, and to this day, Dad still doesn't. He's just like, oh, whatever. Doesn't understand. And argues with me all the time about it, which is, I think I need to thank him for, because that's what makes me so happy to be confrontational, because I had that from the age of 8, just my dad constantly going on at me. We're very different. I'm adopted, so it's really is like two sides of a different universe coming together with me and my dad. So yeah, Mum was really good. She was like, yeah, that's fine. As long as you learn to cook for yourself, you can be vegetarian. So that's how it started. And then, as I say, I went vegetarian at 8. I went into veterinary practice and thought I was doing the right thing. And I did that for years and years and years. And I had a child. And one day they came home from school and just went, who was also vegetarian, of course, all his life. And he just went, we're not doing enough. We need to be vegan. And I remember thinking, don't be silly. We don't need to be one of those. And he was like, yeah, let me show you something. And I don't remember what he showed me on the old tinterweb, but I was horrified. And I remember going to the kitchen and just clearing everything out and going, that's it. That's it. Like, we're done, that we're vegan. And everything changed. And I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful to him. And I'm so grateful that I found it. And I don't care if people say we're a cult or we're weird or anything like that, because once you're in it, as hard as it can be to see what's going on, I just think I feel so much better about everything. And I also think that you meet so many incredible people that are on the same journey as you. And it's absolutely shaped my life, as I know it's shaped your life, and so many other people that I meet that are speaking out about it, or doing things like your fantastic podcast, or running a sanctuary, or doing street activism. It shapes your whole life. It becomes your whole life. So when people say it's a cult, or, I don't care, because actually, yeah, it kind of is in a way. It becomes your whole life, doesn't it? So that's my vegan journey. So that, I think that was about 15 years. I lose track. I can't even remember how old I am. So yeah, it's been a long time. But as with everybody, it should have happened years before, shouldn't it? But there you go.
When did the kind of the desire to do more, when did that come? Because obviously you had the vegan journey, but you've obviously now run an incredible sanctuary and do amazing work there.
Thank you.
You're super active online. You're never backwards in coming forwards about telling people.
That's a polite way to describe it.
No, I mean that in only positive ways.
I know you do.
I mean that in only a positive way. But you're not scared to have those conversations, and to challenge people's view, particularly if they come into your space to interact.
Yeah, absolutely. So that sort of started at about the same time as the veganism. I've run a few businesses. I worked in veterinary practice on and off all my life, but I've also run a couple of businesses. One was when I got pregnant, didn't intend to, but it happened. And I was working in an A&E department in a veterinary practice, couldn't therefore do that because of the radiography and the x-rays. So I couldn't do it. So I literally left work that night, didn't have a job. So I started a wedding stationery business, bizarrely, and it did really well. It did really well for a couple of years. So I've run a business before. I sold that business and I went back into veterinary practice because I thought that was the right thing to do. And then I moved when I met my second wife. I moved and started a dog walking business. And again, I was like, but I'm helping dogs. This is great. So, and then unfortunately I had an accident and broke my back. And that just changed everything. It changed the course of everything, because I had a daycare centre at the time. It was quite a big business. I had lots of employees, it just closed. I couldn't walk. I couldn't do anything. So I had to go back into veterinary practice again. But I was working at reception. I was working at the front of the practice. And then in the end, I ended up being like a clinical, like a surgical liaison. So I had my own consulting room at the front of this big hospital. And that was the first time when I'd really seen people bringing birds into practice, because you don't see it when you're at the back in theatre all day. You don't really see the clients. And they were bringing birds in and there was no one to look after them. They were being turned away. And I was like, hang on a minute, there's something wrong here. Why are we turning these wild animals away? And they were like, well, there might be someone that can help and blah, blah, blah. But there's not, is there? And, I sort of looked into it and realised that I was just horrified that there was nobody helping all these birds, including pigeons. But at the time, I wasn't looking after pigeons. I was looking after all the blue tits, the blackbirds, all the garden birds. And this was in a city practice in Wolverhampton. And we got loads of them. My son had always been massively into bird watching. Whenever we were walking the dogs or we were just out, we would be watching birds. And he taught me so much about birds, so much. He's actually doing a degree in ornithology now, so he's carried on with that as well. And he's obviously vegan as well and massively compassionate. So that was how that started. And then the girl that was running the sort of sanctuary, if you want to call it that, with me alongside work, she was the one that was looking after all the pigeons, and she left. And I thought, oh no, I've got to look after these guys now. And I don't know what I'm doing because pigeons are so different to garden birds. So that was the start of the pigeon journey. And then 6 years on after that, it was like, actually, these guys really need our help, because the garden birds, lots of people, they're pretty and lots of people will look after them. But the pigeons, even in the vegan community, people turn their nose up and they're like, whoa, I don't understand. Why do they need sanctuary? And that's probably one of the most common questions I get in my shop every day. Is like, oh, why do you need to help pigeons? And it's that constant explanation that I never tire of. And I think the more I have to explain it, the more passionate I get about it. So yeah, that was how that started. And again, a bit like with veganism, once you're in it, you see other things that need fixing too. And you see other systems that are broken and people that need help. And it's easy then, once you're in it, it's easy to reach out and do those, make those positive changes. Yeah, and yeah, if people come in and slag off pigeons, I'm like, get out. But I talk to them first. Yeah. There's been a lot of controversy about it, but never mind.
You mentioned it there, you touched upon it, that even within the vegan community, the humble pigeon is often maligned.
Mm.
Why do you think that is? And what's attracted you to coming to their well-deserved aid?
Pigeons, people they see them everywhere. So people assume that pigeons are wild birds and that they're doing okay. They're not a protected species. They're around everywhere, aren't they? And they get in the way. They're a bit of a pest. People call them winged rats. They think they spread disease. They're not wild birds. They are domestic birds that have been released by people when we didn't have the need to breed them anymore. And we've just let them go and let them suffer out on the streets. And that's the reality of pigeons. Mm. So you've got wood pigeons, collared doves and stock doves. They are our native wild pigeon. And stock doves you rarely see. Wood pigeons are everywhere. Collared doves are doing really well. They are everywhere. Feral pigeons, which are the ones that you see on your towns and city streets, they're not wild. They've been in this country for thousands of years. Don't get me wrong. They're part of our country now, but they're not naturally wild birds. They were bred by people for meat and eggs thousands of years ago. The Egyptians used to use them. I mean, we're going back a long way. But we domesticated them in the same way that we domesticated wolves into dogs. It's exactly the same. We did it for us. We did it for our benefit because we could gain something from them. And then we kind of went, oh, we don't need these guys anymore. We've got chickens. And we just went, let them go. And there's no care for them. There's no natural food for them. There's no shelter for them. They are domestic animals. So the fact that they are thriving is just really testament to how brilliant they are and how intelligent these birds are. But there's no food for them. There's no shelter for them. They live, their ancestors lived in caves. They're rock doves, which is why they like to perch on the buildings, these big buildings with big overhangers. It's because they kind of feels like home in there for them. But if they didn't have the crap all over the streets to eat that we leave lying around, they would have died out hundreds and hundreds of years ago. But we keep sort of dropping all our food, and what they'll do, they're grainivores, so they will eat anything that's got a grain background, so bread or bits of that sort of thing. That's what they're looking for when they're scooting around on the floor. but it's not the right environment for them, and they suffer so much because of it. They really, really suffer. So yeah, they're the underdog, and they're hated by so many people, and I guess that's why I like them. Because I'm like, right, I'm going to stand up for these guys, because they're amazing. They're absolutely, like all animals, they absolutely should have our care and attention, but particularly because we did it. We put them there. It's exactly the same as breeding puppies and just letting them out in the street and going, that'll be all right. You'd have some people going, oh, this is awful, and taking them in, and other people going, oh, dogs everywhere. Pigeons to this country and to America to a point, and some other countries are a little bit the same as sort of like the dogs in Bali, that kind of thing. It's the street dogs out there. The pigeons are our version of that. We don't have street dogs because we've got the council come up and scoop up the wild, the stray dogs. But we do have pigeons, but nobody cares about that because they're just pigeons, right? They don't. So that's why. And there's this horrible rhetoric that goes around that they are disease ridden, which is so false. It's absolutely false. Like any animal, like a dog or a cat or a horse or a cow, or any animal or a wild bird, they can carry zoonotic diseases. They can carry, bacteria and viruses that could affect people, but only if you're licking them. Like, who goes around doing that? So it just never happens. There was one case in America in the 60s where there was an outbreak of meningitis, and they blamed it on a virus that was found in pigeon feces I think it was New York. And the local council just went absolutely bananas, shot and poisoned all the local pigeons and blamed it on that. And then they actually tested it, and they were like, oh, actually, that's not where it was from. It was from another person that they caught the meningitis. They found the source. And they're like, oh, sorry, pigeons. But by then, like everything, it's too late, isn't it? That poor information is out there, and people love to blame somebody other than themselves. So they blame the pigeons. And that's where this comes from, and it's just stuck with it. But I'm really delighted to say that now I am seeing a little bit like with veganism, I am seeing little bits of change, people coming in and sort of saying, oh, actually, we should look after them. So part of my mission now, not only to have the sanctuary and look after the birds that we've already got, is going out there and trying to change people's minds and get these birds looked after. And part of the reason why there are so many of them, not just because they are very good at breeding and they're survivors, they're born survivors, is because of the pigeon racing industry, which is that's a whole other subject. I don't know if we have time to go into that. It's hideous. It's a blood sport. And that's kind of my big thing now. And I will absolutely work on this until the day I die now. Without fact, that will be it. That's it, because I've got my teeth into it now and I'm a bit like a Staffordshire Bull Terrier. I won't let go.
Well, we definitely will go into pigeon racing if that's okay. I've got the time if you have. But before we do, just as you were talking then, I thought, and I just I'm in awe of your courage and your determination to help these wonderful animals.
Thank you.
What's the reality like though of running a sanctuary where you're already behind, if you like, in terms of, most sanctuaries.
Sorry, that's the dog having a drink. I'm really sorry.
That's all right. Hello. If we think about like most kind of sanctuaries or animal causes, particularly, in this country, in the UK, if you talk about the Dogs Trust, for example, you'll get a collective R from vegans, non-vegans. There's no PR to be done there. If I explained to somebody about the terrible treatment of beagles, for example, in animal testing, I think that it's a fairly, I mean, don't get me wrong, that is a very noble cause to be
absolutely
championing.
Exactly
but but it's a relatively open door. If I think about my omnivorous sort of friends and family members, if I talk to them about that, I'm onto a winner straight away. They get it. They're going to help. It makes sense. Again, not to diminish any of the amazing work that those folks are doing in championing that cause. But you started a sanctuary where you're already behind the eight ball, as it were, in terms of the omnivorous population. And then I think, okay, so like as you said, it's a struggle even with vegans, but vegans only account for 1% of the population anyway. So you have to rely on communicating with the 99% of the population, as we all do if we run any sort of organisation.
So there's always a thing where, so I was at the Farm Animal Sanctuary last weekend in Evesham giving a talk, and we had a stand and trying to support those guys. The amount of people that support that sanctuary, and rightly so, they've got 600 animals. It costs them thousands. I would imagine it costs them a couple of thousand a day to keep that sanctuary going, right? It's a big deal. they've got lots of volunteers, they've got lots of supporters. It's still a struggle for them, absolutely. But because it's not just vegans, ironic, that will help them, is it? It is other people as well, because they see pigs doing funny things and they see fluffy sheep and aren't they cuddly? And and you can go and hug a cow, and we all love that. And then you show someone a pigeon and they go, because pigeons don't want to be cuddled and they don't want to, there are a lot of pet pigeons, don't get me wrong, but that's not what you see. And then you've got this background noise of dirty and disease and everything. So yeah, absolutely. And then there's the other bunch of people that think they are wild birds. So why would they need help like a cow would need help in a sanctuary or a pig? So yeah, absolutely. You've got all of that. But I think that's kind of the reason why I fight as hard as I fight, and it just makes me drive even more. But the only way I found to do that is to try and make them a little bit cute with the videos that I do. But actually, it's just educating people and explaining why. And also, I really blame people. I will quite happily have a go, and I'll make people feel guilty. I'll be like, we did this. And I'm not even coming at it from a vegan point of view. I'll sort of say, look, we ate them for me. I won't say you did. I'll say we bred them for me. So the way I do it is I use other animals to explain that, like puppies. That's the only way I've found to do it over all the years, is to say, if I went out and bred some puppies, and this is where the racing side comes in as well, because the racing's horrendous. So I had someone in the shop yesterday actually who was talking about horse racing. They weren't vegan, but they were against horse racing and they were against greyhound racing. We were talking about that. And the guy actually said, is that the same with pigeon racing? And I was like, yep, it's exactly the same. It's exploitation in so many ways. It's absolutely horrendous. And that's the way I try and get the point across, is to talk about them and as if they were a puppy. That's the only way I've been able to do it. And then you see that. It's amazing, isn't it? A bit like with veganism, when you see that light switch go on in somebody's head and then you think, right, I've got them now. I've got them. They get it. And they kind of go, oh. So now I have got all these little people that are following and understanding and helping. And now I get people messaging me going, right, and they've got my hats on. I had a picture from somebody in Germany yesterday who's got one of my hats on that's bought it. And she was like, I was out in the street talking about pigeons yesterday. I was like, oh, you're amazing. And just like give them what they need. I'm like, right, do you need some leaflets? Do you need some help? Here's my number. Phone me. It doesn't matter when you phone me. Just like you need the backup, just any questions you've ever got. And it's just been available. And it is exhausting, but I don't think it's any more exhausting than anyone running any other form of sanctuary. I think you just have to remember what you're doing it for. And I have to basically pretend they're puppies to most people to make them understand and be like, if this was a puppy or this was a dog, you would not allow this behaviour. So why are you allowing this now? That's the only way you can do it, is act like any other sanctuary. And we're very much not. But yeah. But also you've got to remember, we just talked about the farm animal sanctuary. Sasha up at the pig sanctuary, she's near us actually, with her sanctuary, she has to raise something like £30,000 a month. I have to raise £60,000 a year. That's it. That is all I need. Now, if I had more than that, then of course I could do more work. But that is to keep the birds going, to keep me going, being able to run the sanctuary and to just about keep on top of things. That is all I need. So we do also have to be realistic that I don't need as much as other sanctuaries, but getting that is very, very difficult. And I haven't met that target yet. And we're on year 4 of funding it through the community interest company, and I'm still on like £25,000 a year funded, so I'm still half the amount, which for me has led to huge sacrifices personally. I am on the verge of bankruptcy personally, which is why I don't think we're recording, but what I said to you, especially after the last 2 years with what's happened, I'm out the gutter and on the pavement but not quite on the driveway, and that's exactly how I feel at the moment. That's how things are at the moment. So we just need to keep going, and I think in some respects what's happened to me and the sanctuary in the last 2 years it has just made me even more determined to carry on and to get back to where we were and then carry on and do more work. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does answer my question. Thank you. Can you talk a little bit about the last kind of couple of years? Because I've been obviously following online, and you've gone through all kinds.
So when I started the sanctuary 15 years ago, it was just me and my son, and we always just had a little aviary in the back garden, and we did what we could, and we looked after maybe 200 birds a year. That wasn't a lot. And then by the time I got married to my third husband, and we were living in Staffordshire, and we had a little bit of land. We had half an acre of land, and I was able to step away from my job in veterinary practice. My husband was profoundly deaf, so I was his carer as well, and his interpreter. So I was able to financially step away from my job. I was in a very privileged position that I could step away and continue to run the sanctuary. And it gave me basically a year of I knew I got enough money in my bank account to keep that sanctuary going for 1 year without any external money coming in. So I'd got that year to get the CIC set up. So a CIC is a community interest company. It is like a charity, but the reason why I didn't go down the route of charity is ultimately it's just me. And I knew that if I needed to get trustees and all the other things involved with pigeons, you can't use family members, you can't use people you know. Who else loves pigeons? So I just was like, I'm not going to get this help. So I need to do it on my own. I've run businesses before, as we said. I've had 2 businesses before. So I'm like, right, I've got the experience. I can set up a business to do this. I'm confident I'm going to do it. Which is why I went down the route of a CIC. So it's a not-for-profit in exactly the same way as a charity, which I think gives consumers and people that are donating the confidence to know, I would hope, that the money is all going to the sanctuary, whether that is paying for aviaries, pigeon food, vet fees, electricity to run the car around, or my tiny little wage that I draw. That's where the money's going. But ultimately, that is all going into the sanctuary, which is why I went down that route. I had run the CIC for about 2 years. It was going okay. And then, unfortunately, the land that we were on was rented, and the person who owned the land decided he needed to sell it. But he was selling it with a property that I couldn't buy. Had it just been the land would have been about 35,000. I had that in the bank. It would have been all my money in the world, but I would have done it. And at the time, I was divorced already, and I was living on a motorhome on the sanctuary land. So not only were the birds homeless, but I was as well. So it kind of just triggered this cascade of crap that happened for the last 2 years. And I had a decision. I had about 30 grand in the bank, like I say, which is a lot of money, but I knew that had to last me. And I knew I'd got some divorce money coming in. And I had 2 decisions. I was living in a motorhome, which was great. And I had the decision of, do I give all these birds, if I can, because I got a lot of birds at the time, about 400, can I rehome all of these birds to another sanctuary and give them that money to look after these birds for the rest of their lives? Because that's what I promised those birds I would do. I could then live as frugally as I could in a motorhome and maybe go around helping other sanctuaries and somehow find an income. Or do I look for other land and take the birds with me and I don't know what will happen? And because I'm impulsive and a bit of a nitwit, I went, I know what I'm going to do. So I got into, so of course the sensible thing to do really would have been to give the birds away, but that's not me and that's not vegans, is it? And you make promises to these animals. So I was like, right, okay. So this incredible lady in Wales offered me some land. So that was it. So I spent 4 months moving all the birds, all the aviaries out to Wales, which was a 4.5 hour drive from where I was. So it took a long, long time. And as you saw, it went on it felt like forever. It was just like, oh, I'm doing this drive again today. Oh, the fuel. So I had an electric car and a motorhome at the time. I had to sell them because I knew I wasn't going to have enough money. So I sold them, bought a truck because I knew I was going to end up having to live in a caravan. I bought a truck and I bought this scabby old caravan to live in. The fuel for the truck, because then the first thing that happened was we had a fuel crisis in the UK. So the fuel for the truck for that move cost £16,000. That's how much it cost me to move those birds. And I couldn't rent one big lorry, which I could drive, but I couldn't get one big lorry and put them all at once because it was only me. So if I'd have put all them in there and all the aviaries in there, when I got to the other end, I had no one to help me because I didn't know a soul out here. So I couldn't rebuild. So that was why I had to do it 3 months. I was doing that journey 4 times a week from Staffordshire to West Wales. And I had somebody at the Staffordshire end helping look after the birds while I was away overnight. But it was, most of the time I was having to do it during the day. So it was just bonkers and it just cost so much. So already I was just like, oh no, this is the wrong decision. I make poor decisions. Why have I done it again? But, the birds needed it. So in the end, managed to get everything out there. It was great. And then it just kind of became apparent that the lady who'd gifted that land to me had other ideas. She kind of got other ideas about what to do, and other people started living there, and it was all a little bit weird and a little bit scary. And I'm not going to go into that because that's her personal stuff, but it just wasn't really appropriate. And then I started to look for other land. And and we had a storm, and our mutual friend Jen, Vegan Queen V, was with me, and that was the first visitor I'd had in 6 months. She was the first person to come and visit me, and it was amazing. And she was like, oh, this is great. And it was a beautiful day in April and the sun was out, and she got no shoes on as usual, and I got a little dress on, and we were out picking nettles because she's all woo-woo, and we were going to make nettle soup. And we were doing that, and then she just looked out the window and went, oh, the wind's picking up soon. And I was like, oh, this isn't forecast. Because when you look after birds, a bit like any animal, particularly birds, you're always looking at the weather. It's like, right, what do I need to do? And within 2 hours, we had a 65-mile-an-hour wind blowing up through that lifted the caravan and lifted the aviary, completely lifted and destroyed the aviary and blew all the sheds over. It wasn't expected, and thank goodness she was there. And it was horrendous, and obviously torrential rain as well. And these poor birds were just out in the wild, and they were just out there. There was a sparrowhawk flying around trying to eat them. There were bits of shed. Me and Jen both got hit several times by like debris flying around. It was horrendous. It was absolutely horrendous. And it was about £10,000 worth of damage. So yeah, it was not a fun day. But the amazing part of the vegan community and actually the pigeon community is within 12 hours, I'd got people driving that had seen, because I put it all online. I was like, this has happened and it's awful. And I got people driving from the Wirral and from Kent and from all over the place coming to help. They were incredible. And we got the aviary back together within about 15 hours. We got everything back together. I mean, it was cobbled together because it's wrecked. But we got everything back together, and all the birds apart from, there were 30 birds that weren't accounted for initially, and then we found all of them apart from 3, which was just, and some of these birds are really disabled. They can't fly, they've got one wing, they've got one leg, they're really disabled birds, and they were the ones I was mostly worried about. And we got them all back, which was amazing. So it was horrendous. But I guess that kind of cemented the fact that we couldn't stay there, because it was on the top of this Welsh hill, which was glorious, but it was so high and so windy. We were like, this is not appropriate. And it was too small a piece of land to really sort of hold the aviaries down. And because of planning law, I couldn't have concrete base. And that was I got an awful lot of criticism for what happened. But it's like, well, hang on a minute. Like, you can't just magic up concrete bases and great big pens. I was homeless. The birds were homeless. We were just doing our best. So we then got in touch with somebody else around here. People around here are really kind. They were like, oh, I've got a 4-acre piece of land. It was 10 miles down the road. I was like, this is perfect. It was lower. It was in a valley. Great. So I went out there, and in return, that he didn't want any payment for the field. He was setting up an orchard there. He was going vegan. So I'd help him with his vegan journey, and I would look after his orchard while he wasn't there. He lived about 50 miles down the road, so he wasn't there all the time. Perfect. So I then got, I was with Matt. Matt moved up, so it wasn't just me, which was really great as well. Like from a helping me as well as the birds, it was amazing. So he'd moved up. So we moved our whole sanctuary again down to this other bit of land, set up a water system because we thought it's going to be long term. Checked with the neighbours, everybody was happy. Like in the middle of nowhere, there was like one person that lived locally, that was it. Brilliant. And we were there for 3 months, and we had got a fundraiser going. We bought a new aviary. It was great. Everything was going really, really well. And then the council flew over with a drone, and then they came onto the land and said, you can't have your birds here. So we assumed it was a planning issue. We were like, oh, don't worry, the aviaries aren't, they're not permanent. We can move them and blah, blah, blah. And they were like, no. You can't be on agricultural land with birds. You need to be on equine or leisure land. We're like, oh, okay, right. What do we need to do? And he was like, oh, £45,000, that'll do it. It's like the Wild West out here. They get away with it. They absolutely get away with murder out here. If you are in with the council out here like this, or you're a farm, you're all right. And if you're not, and it's not xenophobia, it's not because I'm English at all. It's absolutely not. It is just to do with who knows who and who knows what. None of the neighbours had complained. It was literally that they had flown over, seen the aviaries, didn't know what they were, and they were like, nah, wrong, change your use. You need to change your use certificate. And they wanted £40,000, which I didn't have. So we were absolutely screwed again. Then he noticed it was only after all of that, then he noticed the caravan. He was like, please don't tell me you're living on here as well. I was like, yeah. He went, no. He was a really nice man, and he was just like, oh God, I just ruined this woman's life. And I was like, okay. So we had to move again, and this time I was completely stuck because I'd already spent so much money doing all of this. But this incredible lady called Maria, who is vegan and runs a local horse sanctuary, just phoned me the next day. She saw all of this on socials and just phoned me and said, you don't know me, but we're going to help you. And I remember that, I think that was the first time I properly wept. I think that was the first time it all hit me, where I was like, this has been horrendous. like horrendous for the birds, but actually for me it was horrendous. And she just went fine. I went to see her the next day, and within 2 weeks we'd moved half the sanctuary up there. She's amazing. She's absolutely incredible. Her and Eddie are just altruism at its finest, just the kindest people. So they've got a sanctuary. They've got 18 really badly abused horses. And they've got loads of feral cats that get dumped on them. They've got a couple of sheep and a couple of pigs and that sort of thing. And they're just, they haven't got a lot. They haven't got a lot of money. They're working hard. He's a farrier, but he's a really kind farrier. He's a no-shoe farrier. He works for other sanctuaries. So he doesn't charge an awful lot because he's trying to help them. And he goes all over the country doing that. She just spends a whole day working at the sanctuary. They're a fantastic team. And we have now got space on their old, what used to be the horse school when people used to have horses up there to ride. It's sand, it's flat, it's still up on the top of a massive hill, but because it's so big, we've been able to tie the aviaries down, and we went through all the winter storms last year with no damage, no loss of life. I still had to sleep in my truck up there to make sure they were all okay, but it was just amazing. And it's just the kindness of other people. In Wales, I did not expect to find, in West Wales anyway, so many vegans and so many people that are prepared to help, just that incredible kindness. So it's been horrendous, but actually what's got me through is people. There are people who are amazing. People are absolutely amazing. And I get really cross when people say, oh, I hate people. I'm like, oh, no, you hate people. And some people do bad things, but actually most people are good. And if we can just tap into that, then things will get better. And I kind of feel that goes alongside with vegan, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make people who've lost their way a little bit just see what's going on and that they need to change slightly. And I think that people on the whole are inherently good, and certainly that's been my experience out here, So it's the same with the pigeons. So them same people, I'm now saying, you've extended your kindness to me, now extend your kindness to these animals, and it's working. It's working. So yeah, It's been horrendous.
Just incredible.
Fine.
The resilience is just...
Oh, it's not resilience, Jim. You know me. It's stupidity. It's not resilience. It's stupidity.
No, not at all. It's not at all.
It's what it is.
You're driven by a mission.
Well, that's guess. Yeah, that it's true. It's for the animals, isn't it? That's what keeps you going. And then get this, still homeless. Matt and I were like, what are we going to do? We've got nowhere to live. Like, where are we going to go? We were on the council housing list. They said 18 months. We were like, we're literally going to be sleeping in the truck, which I had to do at one point. We were sleeping in a tent at one point in like September up here. It was horrible. And a local lady. So because I'd ended up living in a field, I couldn't run the CIC because it was like -9 and my Mac wouldn't work in the car. So I was like, oh, this is awful. So I'd had to get a shop. As an office, basically, that's how it had started, and it's actually the best thing I've ever done now.
Right.
But at the time, it was just to I'm going to have to just get a shop, so I've got somewhere to store all my stuff and to do my work. And a local shopkeeper who doesn't know me, just we got chatting. She runs a fruit and veg shop. She's vegetarian, runs a fruit and veg shop, and we just got chatting now and again. Lovely, lovely lady. She did the same. She got in touch and she said, "Are you guys still homeless?" And we were like, "Yeah." And now this has happened and we don't know what we're going to do. And she was like, okay, leave it with me. And about 2 days later, she phoned me and she went, right. And it was really sad. Her mum had died quite suddenly. And they were very, very close. And it was really traumatic for her. But she said, there's a bungalow and it's empty. And you guys can move into it. And I was just like, what? What? And the way that, I don't know if it's the same in England now, but with renting out here, you have to have a guarantor. And you have to both be earning, however many people are in the house, you have to both be earning the same amount, so that if you rent a house and one of you dies or buggers off, you can afford it on your own. Well, of course I don't. I draw about £500 a month from the CIC. It's just literally enough to keep me going. And so the estate agents and Wales, they were just like, no, you can't rent this house. So she said, it's my house, I'm going to be their guarantor. She doesn't know me, but she can see the work I'm doing. And she can see I'm trying to help, and was just like, no, I'll guarantor the house. You can have it. And just got rid of all the red tape, and we're in the house. That's where I am now. And just amazing. It's just the kindness of people. She didn't need to do that. Just amazing people. So yeah, it's lovely out here. Everyone needs to, don't everyone move here because it's lovely without you all. But that everyone needs to visit West Wales because it comes through. It's beautiful out here. The people are just so kind, including the farmers. I've had so much kindness from farmers. I had one day where the wheel, there's a whole other story, but the wheel fell off my truck while I was driving it. And it had this horrible accident. And so many people, local farmers driving down that lane, just stopped and were like, are you okay? What do you need? People are just really, really kind. So, yeah, we'll change them all in the end because they've got it in them. So, yeah, it's been interesting. But what is brilliant is I'm in a house, the pigeons are happy, they love where they are now. I've met Maria, who's an inspirational woman in herself, and it's a pleasure to be up there while she's looking after the horses, and I also get to see these little, long-nosed dudes every day now while I'm looking after them. They're coming up going, hey, what's going on? They're brilliant. It's just, I've met so many vegans out here. It's incredible. I've got some really good friends out here now that are vegan, and I've got some helpers now, which is absolutely amazing. So, yeah. So that now enables me to go on to the next bit of fight, which is to get pigeon racing banned. And that is, and having the shop is also just such a good place that I never even considered that having a shop gives me a place where I can talk about pigeons. But actually, I'd spend a lot of time talking about veganism. So it's a great place for really soft activism. So that's what's happened. And these, I just think these things happen and you've got to say yes to them. And if you don't, you regret it.
Let's talk pigeon racing. So the scale of the issue, I've got no. I'll be honest. I'm going to be honest and hold my hands up in my naivety here. My assumption would be, because I follow good people like yourselves, pigeon racing is not good. So that's where my sort of natural kind of like what I've seen has led me to. However, I don't know the scale of the issue.
Okay.
I don't know much about it. And so educate me and hopefully lots of folks listening about pigeon racing. What's going on?
Pigeon racing is a little bit the same as when you go vegan and you see the dairy industry. It's hidden and you think it's all nice and it's not. Pigeon fancying in this country is considered an old man's sport, I think, even now, unless you're in it. And it's very much not an old man's sport. It's not a dying sport. It's not an old man's sport. It is a sport that is worth millions of pounds. It's worth a lot of money. And there are a few reasons for that. And it's also a sport that is very much hidden, a bit like the dairy industry, where people just go about their business doing this pigeon racing and it's not talked about. And it's absolutely just the things that they do are horrendous. So pigeon fanciers love their birds. There is no denying that. When they've got a flock of birds in their loft, they do look after them. They are treated, they're treated so well. They're cared for, they're fed the best food, they're wormed, they have veterinary treatment, they are really, really well looked after. And the reason for that is because they're worth money, or they're worth trophies or kudos with the local pigeon association. So what happens is they will breed these birds and then they do something called widowing. And this is where it gets really nasty. Widowing plays on the emotional and physical aspects of pigeons and of their sort of nature. So a feral pigeon, will mate for life, they'll bond for life. It's adorable. They love so much. Like the pigeons, if you watch any of our videos, the pigeons in our sanctuary are so in love with their partners. So they bond for life. They're so happy and all they want to do is cutch and cuddle and have a great time and have some food and maybe have a bit of a fly, and then that's all they want to do. And then they just want to have babies. That's all that pigeons want to do. So they'll lay 2 eggs in a clutch, and then both parents, so pigeons co-parent. And they're also a little bit, their pigeons and flamingos are the only birds that produce a progesterone-based milk in the same way that we do. But obviously they're birds, not mammals, so they don't have mammary glands. They produce it in their crop, which is incredible. So they produce this delicious milk for their babies. Pigeons suck water. They're not like garden birds that drink by tipping their head back. So they suck their water, and because of that, they suck their milk from their mum and dad's crop. So they stick their head in and they suck it up, and it's delicious. And they are such good parents. Both parents sit on the nest. Both parents do the feeding. They are amazing. So what do? People go, oh, they really love each other. And they both parent. I know, if we take one bird away and take it 300 miles down the road, it'll fly back. And that's pigeon racing. It's called widowing. It is barbaric. You take that bird away, and I can tell you this from just my own experience of looking after them. If we've got a pair, which many of them are paired, if you take one away to check their ring or give them some worm or something like that, they go absolutely mental because they want to get back to their nest. And that's within 3 meters of being near their buddy, their lifelong partner. These birds are taken across the sea, hundreds and hundreds of miles away. The only thing that bird is going to be thinking now, and obviously all I can do is get my head into how would I feel. So we are going to have to humanise it a little bit here. But the only thing that bird can think about is, I need to get home. I need to get home. They let them out 2 days later and they have to fly that distance back. And all they're going to be thinking about is getting home to their partners. So we are playing on the bird's ability to fly, the bird's ability to navigate, and the bird's ability to love another soul. So it's not only physically exploiting them, not exploitation, and it's also mental exploitation because, and that's why it's so popular and that's why it's so easy to do. And birds they don't cost an awful lot to keep, even to that standard. An individual bird, the reason it costs a lot for us is because we have a sanctuary full of them. But if you've got 60 birds in your flock, it's not going to cost you that much. But the prizes are big. In China, about 4 months ago, a pigeon racer bird sold for £1.9 million, one bird, because it was such a good flyer. It's not an old man sport. It's a sport worth a lot of money. They just hide it very, very well. It's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. And the exploitation is just horrendous. Now, add to that the fact that by their own review, the pigeon racing, their own review says that 60% of their birds don't make it home, particularly when it's overseas. So, for example, a bird from Ireland will be brought over on a lorry with thousands of other birds over to, say, I don't know, somewhere in England, Norfolk, let's say. Like, they will go that far and they'll release them. They might get as far as across from Norfolk to Wales, which is where, this is the trajectory they're going. They'll get across there easily within a couple of hours. They can fly at 90 miles an hour if they need to. They're really fast birds. But then they've got to fly over the sea. And they're not natural. They're not migratory birds. They're quite territorial. They don't naturally want to do that. There's no food, there's no water. And even if they land to have a rest, they're not like blackbirds that can find an insect. There is no food for these birds. They're domestic. So they do this journey and they've got no way of sustaining themselves on this journey at all. Plus the fact that when they land, they often hit windows, they hit cars, because they've never been out before, a lot of these birds. These are their first races quite often because they use young birds to race. They have no idea where they are. They don't know about hawks. They're domestic. So they've done all of that already. And then we're asking them to fly across an ocean of water and they drown. About 60%. It's barbaric. And it's not frowned upon. And I'm not going to get down the route of the RSPCA because that's a whole other level of hatred and a whole other podcast. But the RSPCA have no problem with it, and neither do the general public. They're birds, they're meant to fly. Well, no, they're not. If we let our flock out for a fly, our able-bodied birds, they will fly for 10 minutes in a big circle. You can see them. They don't go far, and then they land back down. That's what pigeons do. That's why in your towns and cities, your feral pigeons don't go very far. They're always hanging around, getting under people's feet, pooing on window ledges. They don't fly far. They don't want to. So they have the ability to do it, but they don't want to do it. It's not their natural behaviour. But people, that's what people do. They're the people that I hate. I don't hate everybody, I just hate them. So, kind of my mission now, on top of looking after the ones we've got, is to try and get this banned. And the other reason, and this is why I try and get the public engaged with this, even if they don't think that's cruel, they get peed off with pigeons being everywhere, right? They're pooing on this, they're pooing on that. Okay. How can we stop that? We could get our local councils to build a coop outside town and feed them and take their eggs away like we do in the sanctuary so that they're not breeding and breeding and breeding. That would work. That would stop pigeons being everywhere under people's solar panels, causing trouble and being around in the towns and cities. But it won't work. And the reason it won't work is because pigeon racers release their birds come down, and the only place they can find any sort of sustenance is to look for another flock and join them. So our city flocks just get bigger and bigger and bigger because they're releasing thousands of birds a week. So even if, as a society, we took responsibility for our own mess that we made and said, okay, we've left these guys here, they're suffering, let's give them a nice house, where they can all go and live, and let's get their numbers down by removing the eggs, and by, giving them good food so their poo isn't as bad. Let's get them out of the towns and the cities. That isn't going to work because you're going to have a few birds there still, and the pigeon racers are still continuing to breed birds in their thousands. And these birds come down and they look for people because they're domestic. They don't necessarily look for other birds instantly. They look for people because they know people mean food, which is why so many people that contact us say, this bird just wandered into our house. There's a bird in my conservatory, there's a bird in my garage. It's because they're looking for people, because they've got no fear of people, because people have always looked after them until they didn't. But in that bird's life, all they've known is that my handler gives me food and looks after me. And that's why they look for people. It's just a whole level, like a whole other level of cruelty to, you know, to breed an animal, gain their trust, and you're essentially their parent, and then release them. So yeah, we've got a major problem with it in this country. So Peter, the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, contacted me in December last year and asked for our help in trying to get this out there, get this information out there. So we needed a high profile figure, so we went for King Charles because everyone knows who the king is, right? Now, King Charles has a flock of racing birds. He races his birds and he makes money from that. And this is not me with any opinion on the monarchy. I'm kind of on the fence with those guys. I don't really care about them. But he has a flock in Sandringham, and he every year puts a couple of his birds up for an auction. So what Peter did was they had a donor that was prepared to buy one of those birds, or a few of those birds, depending what they went for. The money did not go to the Pigeon Racing Association. I was very clear that I wouldn't have any part of it if that was the case, and obviously that Peter wouldn't do that either. So the money went to, the auction was for a children's charity. That's where the money went. This donor bought 3 of the king's birds, and they came to us to live, so that we could push this information out there with a high profile character, basically, you know, the king. Unfortunately, it was just the timing. That was the time when the king got cancer. So because Peter aren't gits, they pulled back a little bit, and so did we, and we didn't go for him too much because, you know, ultimately he's a human being with cancer. It's not good. So it fell flat a little bit, but we still got a lot of traction from it. And the main thing that we were asking him to do was to step away from being the patron of the Pigeon Racing Association, because by doing that, he's saying it's okay, and he stepped away from it, which is amazing. So it was a really, really good result. And what it's also done is got publicity. There's been some like BBC radio interviews. There's been some publicity. It's been online, and people are now seeing and coming to us and saying, well, why is it bad? Why are you asking that? What it's also done, which always happens with me, is caused a lot of arguments. So I, again, like I did when I got dragged through newspapers about 3 years ago, I've had death threats. I've had threats that I'll have bricks through the shop window. I've had people in the shop being aggressive. And that's fine, because that is what I absolutely love. I thrive on that, because you can spin that, because I've got a business background. I'm like, right, what can we do with this? How can we make money for the pigeons by these people being horrible to me? So that's what we've done. So it's had like it's been 3-pronged, if you like, and it's made a real difference. And I'm so happy. So now what we've asked him to do is step away from racing pigeons completely and turn his flock, his pigeon loft, into a sanctuary for pigeons. That's still going on, that's ongoing, and that now is between Peter and him. They're talking, and I'm not privy to those conversations, but they do incredible work, you know, and they've been great with us, yeah, we're doing quite a few campaigns out at the moment to just connected on social media, basically, to try and get people talking about it and try and push it. So away from the work with Peter, I'm now trying to gather a mailing list of thousands and thousands and thousands of people that will sign a government petition that I intend to take to Parliament to ask the government to ban overseas pigeon racing. I don't think in my lifetime I'll ever get pigeon racing stopped. And I don't think there is the evidence for cruelty, unfortunately, is anecdotal, because unless you're in that industry or you're a rehabber, you're not seeing those pigeons, and there's not really any way of documenting the cruelty. It is all anecdotal evidence. You're never going to get that across, you know, you just can't. But the flying over the sea, there are statistics from the Racing Pigeon Association that are available online. Widowing, anybody can go and Google widowing, and it will tell you exactly what they do with these birds, particularly when they want them to fly long distances. And we know we've got evidence of birds that have been dragged out the sea. So those 3 things are enough to try and get a petition together, and that's my next. Now we're like, as a person and as a sanctuary, we were a bit more like, right, we're back on board, we can continue with things. What's the next mission? And that's the next mission, is to try and get people on board. So that's why I'm shouting it as much as I can, doing as many interviews and podcasts as I can, and doing as much work as I can, just to get people on board, so that when we eventually get this petition started, we can get the signatures we need to take it to Parliament and say, you need to stop this. So it's a work in progress, but it needs to stop.
The practice of widowing, just a naive question, but just to clarify. So that practice is that's standard. That's how you do pigeon racing.
I'm sure that if you're in a local race and you just took one of the pigeons away, they would naturally come home. They absolutely would. I think the reason why they do widowing, and this is my understanding of it, and the reason I say it's my understanding is that if you go and ask a pigeon fancier, they will deny it even happens. They just lie. They outright lie. And they'll say, no, it doesn't happen. Despite the fact that one of the biggest food manufacturers, Bamford's, that manufacture pigeon food, make food specifically for widowing. It's called widowing food. And yet if you ask them publicly, they'll say, oh, no, we don't do that. Like, of course you do. They just outright lie. Yeah, it's not well known, but yeah, to get them home on these big races, that's what they'll do. Because there has to be that drive to get home. There has to be. You know, pigeons want to get home to their family, of course they do, but ultimately you're asking a bird that normally flies, I don't know, 5 miles a day. You're asking that bird to potentially fly 400 miles in a day or longer than that. 800-900 miles, some of these races. That bird's going to get tired. So you've got to have something to make it continue. A bit like me. You've got to, you can hit rock bottom and you can be exhausted, but you've got to continue for these birds. These birds have got to continue because their only thought is to get home for their partner. They don't know anything else. They've got no other knowledge of the world. Their whole world is in that pigeon coop. They know nothing else because they've never been flown before.
I take it the people who've kind of come after you, the backlash you've received, that's from within the world of pigeon racing, is it?
Always, yeah. And they'll always, a little bit like meat flakes and farmers, they'll always come and say, it's not cruel, we love our birds. It's like, dude, if you loved your birds, you wouldn't do that to it. You wouldn't do that to an animal that you loved. You wouldn't do that to another being if you loved them. That wouldn't happen. So you love them while they're in your care and you're making money from them or getting a trophy, but you don't love them when you release them. That's not love. How is that love? You're abandoning an animal that you bred specifically for that. I mean, there's other parts of pigeons that's cruel as well, like show pigeons. We had 40 pigeons from one guy surrendered to us last year that were Indian fantails. And he surrendered those birds because he'd always kept birds and his dad had kept birds, all sorts of birds, chickens and not just pigeons. And he fancied doing it. He was like, oh, I'm going to show these birds. They're beautiful and I love them. This guy I've got to know, he's such a nice man, genuinely such a nice man. He bred these birds. They were looking really good. He took them to his local pigeon show. They didn't win. So he said, oh, how can I improve? What do I do? He talked to other pigeon show people and they said, oh no, just neck them, just kill them. That's what you need to do. Start again. They're disposable. And he was so traumatized by that, he had a breakdown and contacted us and was like, I've got all these birds. And then unfortunately, because he wasn't well, his birds bred and bred and bred. So he got 10 show birds. By the time we took him, he got 56 birds that we had to have in our sanctuary because he just couldn't cope. The poor guy, he's just the nicest man. But he didn't know. He didn't know it was so cruel. And that's exactly what happens when we get hold of, so let's say somebody brings in a racing pigeon that's come down in a race to us, whether they're injured or not is irrelevant in this instance. They come to us, we have a legal responsibility to contact that owner because they are an owned piece of property. They've got a ring on, or sometimes they have the telephone number stamped. In all the years I've been looking after pigeons, I must have come across or helped with 12,000, and I'm pulling that out of the air, but it's got to be around about that, cases of pigeon racers. 12, it's got to be about 12,000 now. 4 times have they been collected. 4. And I never use our number. I never say we're a sanctuary. I don't give my number. We use a burner phone, like a dodgy kit, because I daren't use like a phone with my number on, because unfortunately I'm too well known by the pigeon fanciers now. So they'll be like, oh, well, if she's asking, then we'll have to say it because otherwise we'll get into trouble. So I use a different phone under a different name and I put the number through and they will say to me, I'll just kill the bird. Or the one that grinds my gears even more is I'll say, oh, you can keep them. They make good pets. I don't want to keep your bloody bird, mate. I've got hundreds of them. I don't want you to have them back either. But that's not the point. The point is, why are you doing this? These birds are just worth nothing. They're worth nothing. So we get told to kill them or to just look after them. So there are an awful lot, thousands of people in this country now who've got pet pigeons because they have to, because we can't have them all and neither can any other. There's some other amazing pigeon sanctuaries in this country and there are just too many. We're drowning. We're literally drowning in birds. There's just not enough people to look after them. And if they were wild birds, I'd have no anger over that Even if it was a climate change thing, I'd be like, look, these birds need help. We all need to pull together and help. It's not. It's people. It's greed. It's people breeding the birds, continually causing this problem. And that's why I get so angry about it, because it doesn't need to happen. It shouldn't be happening. If I woke up tomorrow and there were not a single feral pigeon in the world, I would be so happy. They shouldn't be here.
It's incredible. Just that everything that you've said has been a huge education, but also just I'm just full of admiration for what you're doing. It's just incredible. But I want to direct people to how to help. What can we do to help the amazing work you do, whether it be the petition against pigeon racing, whether it be the sanctuary itself? What do you need? Is it donations? Is it help? Where can we go?
The first thing that everyone needs to do is just remember a tiny bit of what I've said, a tiny bit, and keep that cruelty there. And next time you see somebody, talk to them about pigeons. And they'll think you're bonkers, and then you can be in my little bonkers gang. It's fine. We're all fine to be bonkers about pigeons, because they need it. Because the word is out about dairy, the word is out about all these other animals, but it's not out there. So the first thing you need to do to help all the birds is to go and talk to somebody else about it. If you see a kid kicking a pigeon in the street, explain to their parent why we shouldn't be doing it, why they need our help. And if you see on Facebook is a place that's full of pigeons that need help, please direct them to me, to another local sanctuary. We will all help. From a point of view of the petition, absolutely, if you could follow all our socials, we are at Little Green Pigeon on all the social media sites. Instagram's the one that kind of drives all the others, because that's the one I can use, basically. So if you can give us a follow and see the work that we're doing and share our stories, share the word about the pigeons on there, that would be amazing. Our website is littlegreenpigeon.co.uk. We like the shop. We sell loads of merchandise. We are not a charity shop. We sell new merchandise, hats, mugs, cup, sort of all that kind of thing, greetings cards. You can buy, it's all vegan. You can buy from there. That all helps. All the money you donate and all the money from products goes to our sanctuary. And that in turn helps me to keep going and helps the sanctuary. And then this petition to keep going. And yeah, as far as the petition is concerned, if you can just get in touch with me, drop me a WhatsApp, give me a phone call. I don't care. My number is public. Anybody can ring me. Just let me know who you are. I have a list, a really long list now, a digital list of emails that I'm keeping, so that when we're ready to go with this petition, I can get in touch with everybody and let them know how they can sign this. So yeah, just get in touch with us and love pigeons. And also go to your local town park or wherever they are and just watch them. Just watch them for the individuals that they are, and you will love them. And once you love them, that will never go, because you'll realise how complex they are as little beings. They're not just dirty grey birds. They have a complex social structure, and we need to help them.
Sue, it's been amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. I know you're super busy.
Thank you so much for your time, Jim. And your podcast is brilliant. Thank you so much for everything you do. You do so much to help the vegan cause. I love you to bits. You're absolutely amazing. So everybody needs to come and watch these podcasts and listen to these as well and learn from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I love you. You're brilliant.
This is a Bloody Vegans production.